Welcome, welcome, everyone. It is 3 p.m. ET on Tuesday, and that means it is time for a special edition of Crime Time here on A Mighty Blaze. I'm Hank Phillippi Ryan, your host. I'm the author of 13 USA Today bestselling novels. I know this. Author is the person who writes the book. The book is the book is the thing that is written. I know this. I practice this. Whatever. Anyway, hello, I'm Hank Phillippi Ryan, USA Today bestselling author of 13 novels of suspense. The current one, Her Perfect Life, has just been nominated for the Agatha for Best Novel of the Year. Thank you. And I am very happy about that. Today, we have the absolute immense honor of talking with the fabulous Kaira Rouda, whose brand new Somebody's Home is sinister and dark and chilling. And I'm telling you, read it with the lights on. The fab Heather Gudenkauf says, Somebody's Home is a thriller worth staying up all night for, says Heather Gudenkauf. And I have to say, Kaira, I actually almost did with this because I absolutely couldn't put it down. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This book is just out. And how has it been telling the world about it?
It's been fun. I've gotten a lot of the staying up too late reading it, which is a great compliment. So thank you for that. And also that it's kind of scary. People are, so sorry. It's a little terrifying, people, but there you have it.
Well, you know, I always say here in the pandemic, I've always said it's always safe inside a book. And right. Your book does show us that we can always close it if we want to. It's just that we don't want to close it. So I want to hear in a minute all about where you came up with the idea and where you came up with these incredibly sinister characters and all the timely topics that you talk about. But let me welcome you all. If you have not been at A Mighty Blaze at Crime Time before, good, because you have picked the perfect time to be here. We're usually on at 4 p.m. ET. Sometimes we have special guests, and we have them at 3 p.m. ET, and that is what we're doing today with Kaira Rouda and her brand new Somebody's Home. A Mighty Blaze was started by the fabulous Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt 2 years ago now, at the beginning of the pandemic, to keep us all reading and keep us all connected and keep us all discovering new books. And that is why we have Crime Time. Today, we are talking with the fabulous Kaira Rouda. And let me tell you her formal bio. I'm going to read it to you so I get this right. Kaira Rouda is a multiple award-winning USA Today bestselling and Amazon chart-topping author of contemporary fiction who explores what goes on beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. Her novels of domestic suspense include The Next Wife, The Favorite Daughter, Best Day Ever, and All the Difference. You've read those, right? They're incredible and quite amazing. Kaira's work has been translated into more than 10 languages. She lives in Southern California with her family and children and is right now working on her next novel. And you can find her, not right now, but after the show, not right now, but after the show at kairarouda.com. Welcome. Kaira, I want to talk with you about pretense and marriage and truth and greed and families and how far people will go to get what they want, no matter who's hurt along the way. And your book is also very timely and kind of brave. So we'll talk about all that. But I do want to talk about your story first. Set it up. Here's Gail Rosenfeld. Welcome. So many people coming today, and so nice to see you at this special time. So Kaira, tell us the story of your book.
Well, okay, so the story came to me during the lockdown phase of the pandemic. And I guess because we were all at our houses and, my 420-something kids came home and everybody's back reconstituted. And I just found myself thinking, what if home wasn't safe? Mm-hmm. And in that time when we had to depend on that, and that's kind of where the story sprung from, was the notion of, in the story, you'll meet Julie, who's a newly single mom who's leaving her husband, unloving marriage, and taking her teen daughter, who's a senior in high school, Jess, to start a new life. And the new life to her is really personified by the new home she's bought for them across town. And meanwhile, there's a guy named Tom who, this is his family's home. His family has sold it to Julie and moved moved on, but Tom still is in the carriage house, and Tom doesn't want to leave. He's been given the weekend to pack up and move on, but that is not really what he wants to do. So that kind of sets it up, I think.
It does set it up. And the first line of your book is, somebody is in my house. And when we think about somebody's in my house, we think of a home invader. But this is not who Tom is. This is where he feels he lives. And he has had the home invader, essentially the new family, move into the house where he has lived because his father and stepmother have sold it out from under him, actually. Yes. And he is not happy.
He is not a happy guy, no. And I mean, Tom does have a just kind of sad backstory. His mom, he watched his mom drive away, leaving his dad in that driveway of that house. So in his mind, he thinks if he leaves that house, his mom might never come back to him. So that's kind of psychologically, he's really committed to this place. Also, he doesn't have anywhere to go. He's working part-time in a bar as a bartender, and he just doesn't have any money to go anywhere else. So pretty much Tom is stuck and an unhappy guy.
I mean, he is sort of a lost soul, but we learn even in chapter 1 that he's channeled this lost soul in kind of a terrifying direction. He's gotten a group of new friends. Gail is saying, remind me never to buy a home.
At least make sure it's empty.
Yeah, at least make sure it's empty. So Tom has taken up with a group of guys who may not have anyone's best interest but their own at heart. That's a scary group of people, and your book is about choices, what choices we make, and I'll talk about that more. But talk a little bit about the choice that Tom has made and his need. I mean, he feels that he's lost his family, but this group of guys sort of gives him a new one.
Right. They are giving him a sense of belonging, right? So he's in his mid-20s. He didn't want to go to college. He's kind of drifting through life, and they find him and recognize that they could probably make him into what they want him to be. So, it's a group of guys that come to the bar. They start befriending him. He thinks these guys are really cool. And so even before the book starts, they invited him to go out to the desert and kind of a retreat and learn how to shoot guns and, do manly man things. And Tom thinks that's a really great thing.
I mean, this is all in chapter 1. You also were not giving anything away. I look over here, I'm looking at the comments, and I see Sylvia, welcome, Mozania, welcome. So nice to see you all. At the beginning, and again, we're not giving anything away, Tom is learning to channel his anger. He is really an angry person. And the idea of how you created this psychologically damaged guy, you must have done some research into how anger develops and how that's channeled and how it's fed. How did you make him so perfectly angry?
Yeah, I mean, I've been, I guess, just in the news and in kind of our society right now, there is a lot of anger and anxiety, and it's all kind of bubbling up. At least to me, I have read a lot about like our paramilitary people that. It's really gives people a sense of belonging. And then, of course, our proliferation of guns in America, too. So we've got kind of this perfect confluence in a scary, scary way. I heard this woman, Kathleen Blue, speaking, and she's kind of an expert on our domestic terror threat. And if you just kind of, I don't know, to me, Tom he's not fully into that movement yet, but he's very susceptible. And I just wanted to show how someone who's just a sad kind of loner guy can get sucked into a really dark world.
And I think you did set that so beautifully. If you just joined us, we're talking about the fabulous, sinister Somebody's Home by Kaira Rouda. And one of the main characters, as we were talking about, is Tom. And you use him perfectly to show that vulnerability, that when someone is needy and feeling bereft and alone, that if the wrong person takes over their brain and mind and sort of entraps them, the dangers that can happen. But let's move on to the women in the story, because two of the main characters are Julie, a mom, and Jess, her daughter. Julie is escaping from what she feels is an abusive and terrible husband who is self-centered and pushy and aggressive and doesn't let her be who she wants to be. Talk a little bit about Julie and where she came from, and Jess.
Yeah, so Julie is really ready to start her life over. She's found that has everything materialistically speaking in life. She lives in this huge mansion on the ocean, but she, it's the proverbial gilded cage. She feels trapped. She feels like her husband, he's not been faithful for many years, and she just doesn't feel appreciated or loved. And she wants to model a different type of life for her daughter, Jess, while she still can. So she's running out of time because it's senior year. Jess is, kind of grew up with just a huge amount of wealth and is pretty entitled and pretty spoiled at this point. So Julie's saying, okay, I'm going to start over. I'm going to take my daughter and we're going to go live a more authentic, real life. And so that's when you meet them as they're driving across town to start their new life in the new home, unfortunately with someone in the carriage house. And Jess is not happy about it. Jess thought life was perfectly fine where they were. Her best friend was down the street. Everything was great. She'd already gotten accepted into college. So she's just biding her time until she can go away for school. And this new, I guess, midlife crisis of her mom is not making Jess happy at all.
Well, you have this wonderful scene where the two of them are driving up to their new home with Julie, the mom, being thrilled about changing her life, and Jess, the daughter, thinking, "Get me out of here." Yeah. And the mother also, it's not just that she wants to start over with a new life on her own, but she wants to start over with her daughter. She looks back with regret at how she, because of her fancy, privileged life, has sort of neglected her daughter, and she regrets that. Talk a little bit about mother-daughter relationships and why that was important to the book.
Well, I do think at the heart of the story is the mother-child dynamic. Sandy, who's the other mom in the story, loves Tom as if he were her own child, and has tried to show him the love that she could. So it is that it's moms doing their best and doing everything they can, what they think is right, to help protect their kids. So I do think Julie feels like at the start of the book that she's saving her daughter by moving her out of this gilded cage that they've both been living in.
But Jess, the daughter, feels as if they're moving to the wrong side of the tracks. That they've had everything that they wanted. Why she sees this house as decrepit and broken down and the wrong side of town. It's this wonderful structure of the book of the have and have-nots, so gorgeously portrayed in somebody's home. Which side are you on throughout? Yeah.
I do. And I do think that's another thing that's just becoming more and more clear in our society. There's this extreme wealth and these people that pretty much live above all of us normal people. They can fly everywhere. They're in their yachts. They're just surrounded. And Roger kind of is that kind of guy, Julie's husband. And so, the rules don't apply. And for a girl like Jess, who's been raised in that environment where she's watched her father not play by the rules and just live this life of extravagance, it's hard for her to come down to the real world, which is where Julie has moved her to.
And she doesn't even understand what the real world is. This is all that she has known is excess and luxury and pretense, which is another thing that you talk about in this book. Someone pretending to be who they're not, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all those kinds of pretenses come through. Again, the sort of double lives that people have, and the conflict of this side of the tracks, the other side of the tracks, have and have not, real and pretend. Talk about that dichotomy a little bit.
Yeah, my books, I've always written about what's beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. That kind of has always intrigued me. And now, of course, with social media, you can pretend to be anything you want to be with whatever filter you'd like to be. So my characters do, and my books do tend to explore that a lot. In this book particularly, I think they're, as you pointed out, the dichotomies, because I have three families kind of coming together, two families kind of coming together, and a lot of point of views, you can see through other characters will tell you what they see in one character, and then the character herself will be telling you something maybe totally different, because a lot of times you don't even see yourself the way others see you. And maybe because you pretended so long, you don't even know. In Julie's case, she's just trying to get back to her true self, and she's lost that.
You do that so beautifully in the points of view. I mean, this is not this is a complex and gorgeous book, but it is a page turner and so fast to read, and such a treat. You will not be able to put it down. Somebody's Home by Kaira Rouda. The pretense that you're talking about, though, I thought Julie was so fascinating because she talks a lot about how she was brought up and the expectations of what a woman should be and how a woman should be and how they should present themselves to the world, and that's the only way to succeed. Talk a little bit about that, how we as women have goals set for us by someone else that we may realize aren't so good later on.
Right. Yeah. And so Julie's done every, I think, plastic surgery known to man. She just remade herself. She moved from a small town in Florida to California, the home of plastic surgery. And she worked at an office of a plastic surgeon. So she was kind of a test case for him. So she has remade herself into this really kind of like a Real Housewives. One of her goals early on was to be on that TV show. So that was her goal. And yeah, and so she realizes that by the time you meet her, she's realized that all of that is not what's important in life. And she's really learned that lesson in some ways through her daughter, who like scoffed at her mom's like persistence of telling her she should get plastic surgery done, and her daughter's like, no, that's gross, I'm not doing that. So it is the whole society having this image of what a woman should be is also something that I've always been fascinated with as well. I think, as a working woman in the world, as you and I both are, we know that there's so many the dichotomies, especially through the generations, right? 30 years ago, holy camole, like working in the working world, it was just terrible. And a lot of that stuff is still hanging out there and hanging around. But I think the third wave of feminism is helping a lot to kind of push through all of that, of what we are all supposed to be, because we're all supposed to be ourselves.
And that is what Jess says to her mother, that she can't, and her mother can't even believe it, that her daughter says, I like the way I am, the way I am. Yep. And this is exactly what a self-actualized person does. And yet the mom is saying, no, you're not good enough. And that's one of the things that she wants to change. I mean, I want you all to know that Somebody's Home is deeply riveting and sinister psychological suspense about these two families then in conflict. How did you set up, tell us if you can, how you set up the conflict between Tom and his father and his stepmother, and then Roger and Julie, and how those families clash together?
Yeah. So by the time that we meet all these characters, they're all kind of been pushed to the edge in a sense. So Tom's dad is a pastor, and he has lost his flock. He has been pushed out of the church that he kind of grew and built, a big mega church in town, and he's been disgraced and sent away. So that Doug is just angry too. And his wife, Sandy, who really is just a nice, kind woman. And they have two younger sons that Tom calls the replacement boys, and doesn't really appreciate that. She's starting over as well in a new house. And she would have stayed in the home that Julie bought forever. She thought it was her forever home too, but because Doug messed up, they have to move. And so she's starting over as well. So I guess that's a big conflict and Sandy, the pastor's wife, knows what her husband's been up to, and that's hard too. And she's really trying to help get Tom to see that he has to leave. Throughout the whole story, she's trying to find a mom-like way to say, you've got to come out, and also get her husband, the pastor, to see that Tom is dangerous and needs to be moved along. So anyway, so that family is doing a lot of moving. And then also, as Julie and Jess are starting over in that house, Roger, who is her husband, thinks that he can control them like the whole weekend, he's just convinced if he gets enough attorneys involved, if he gets, whatever, he can woo Julie back. And it has worked before with offers of money or a beach vacation or whatever. But this time she's not going to go back.
And that's why the title "Somebody's House" is so beautiful. Somebody's home is also so perfect, because it's not just someone's at home, but one of the centerpieces of the story is this home, which is somebody's home. Tom feels it's his home that he's essentially been kicked out of, and Julie at least feels like it's their new home. And the action sort of centers around possession, and there's so much about possessions in this book, how much you own and how much you have, and what's of value to you. And it's also about greed and power. Talk about greed and power a little bit, and how that, whether it's spiritual greed and power, or financial greed and power, or emotional greed and power.
Yeah, there is a lot of that too. Yeah, right. Because power comes in a lot of different forms. I mean, Pastor Doug feels powerful when he has a huge flock that adores him, and that's where he gets his power from. And then Roger feels powerful because he can amass as much money as he wants to, and can use it and spend it wildly on himself and whoever he wants to choose to bestow it upon. Julie's realizing that her power, she's given up all of her power and become something that she doesn't like when she looks in the mirror. So she's taking her power back by starting over and hoping to get more real. Sandy learns through the book to stand up for herself as well, and that she doesn't have to fall under the trap of her husband. And so she's also going to take her power back. So I think, when it comes down to it, at the heart of this story is that back to belonging, and what makes you feel at home, and how can you make a life that's both genuine and loving. And that's how you find belonging, not through things and power and all that stuff.
Yes. And that's so perfect, Kaira. That's so beautifully and wonderfully said. But balanced against what the other people's power is Tom's power, which is violence. And it shows, and your book shows so gorgeously how upsetting to everyone's lives as people are going along, doing the best they can, how that the advent of potential violence, or even planning of violence, or the thought of violence is so destructive.
Yep. And the fact that his violent tendencies are nurtured and encouraged by his new friend group is really scary. I mean, that kind of thing is what was kind of in the back of my mind when I was writing this book, is how easily influenced Tom is by this group of men he's met, because he wants to belong to them. He wants them to accept him into the group. So, yeah. So, I mean, to do what he wants to do in the story, which we can't say what it is because it's kind of the suspense. But what he's planning, I'd like to think he wouldn't have even considered doing if he hadn't met these guys.
And do you all who are listening to Kaira Rouda and me talk about Somebody's Home, you're hearing how we're sort of dancing around the plot here so carefully, so we don't give anything away about Somebody's Home. But you were talking about influence, Kaira, and that's so fascinating, because when you mix bigotry and privilege and influence, and then add social media to that mix, it's absolutely devastating, the pressure that can cause. Talk a little bit about why you stepped into these very timely, bravely kind of stepped into these very timely themes for, this is a novel of psychological suspense. This absolutely such a page turner, but like all good books, there's more to it than that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as a novelist, and this too, sometimes you can't help but step into what you're hearing in the world and seeing in the world. And I think especially during the pandemic, I don't know about you, but I had a really hard time, especially in the beginning, reading anything. But I could come up to my office and write like a lot. That was kind of my escape. And like you were saying, it's great to escape into a book, and you can close the book and it's not real. But the world was so scary outside of that. So I think in this story particularly, a lot of I guess more like ripped from the headlines events made their way into this book, as opposed to some of my other ones that stayed more marital suspense, I guess. This one's broader, more society based.
But still, as a Kaira Rouda book always is, it's about family and the effect of those things on family, and how danger and a mistake, how vulnerable teenagers are, those kinds of things. Again, we're dancing, dancing, dancing. But the power of social media and the idea of how something can multiply is so explored.
Right. And to your point, I mean, in the story, one of the characters makes a bad decision, and her bad decision is then captured and spread across social media. And you know, along with the theme of we always hurt the ones we love the most, is the fact that when I was growing up, there wasn't, you know, you could make a mistake and your mom and dad would know about it and maybe your friends. But nowadays you make a terrible mistake and it's caught forever and can spread and ruin your life pretty much. So yeah, it's a dangerous world.
Yeah, I mean, but you again are drawing on that dangerous world, and we can close the book, but you were writing the book. What was it? I mean, there were some scary, scary scenes and some really emotionally chilling scenes. What was it like to write those?
Yeah, I actually, in this book, it was the first time I was up here writing and I scared myself. So I had to stop, like run downstairs. My office is upstairs. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I like go running downstairs. My husband's like, what? I'm like, I just scared myself. I got to stop for the night.
You just scared yourself with what you wrote.
Uh-huh.
And I know your husband must be used to this, but what did he say?
Well, he always tells people he sleeps with one eye open anyway, and nowadays with these stories, but he's like, how can you scare yourself? You're in charge of your characters. I'm like, no, actually, once you start writing, those guys, especially Tom, was very, very present and just wanted to take over. I had to rein him back a lot, actually, because he wanted to be worse than he already is.
I mean, the scenes, I mean, even the little things that Tom does I'm picking up the book again, in somebody's home. And again, I'm not giving anything away to you all because you're going to run right out and get this fabulous book. You know, he's kicking the wall with his boot and he's corralling someone into a place and he's looking at a photo and you just think, oh, no, no, no. Why doesn't anybody see this? And it's so intense. And internal. I know you were talking about how this came out of the pandemic and how you were thinking about what it would be like if your home wasn't safe. How did the book blossom from that? What did you, I know this is, you're a Washington person, but what did you know about this book and when did you know it?
Well, I guess it blossomed. My husband was in Congress and I was going to a lot of hearings and about domestic violence and the threat of domestic terrorism. And that was right before the pandemic, literally. And I flew home in March and right when everything shut down and then here I was in my house. And so I know that informed some of the story. And usually what happens with me is I'll have a character comes into my head and Tom arrived and then a title arrives, somebody's home. And that's pretty much how it starts. I'm a pantser, so I don't have an outline or anything like that. I just kind of let my characters start writing. And I noticed probably from an interview or something that these are really short chapters. And I think that's also something about the pandemic as well. Like my characters had short attention spans, or at least I did as their kind of mastermind, but they all of these characters just started coming to life and wanting to tell their side of things. So it was a fun, scary experience writing this book, but it was informed by things that I had learned, I guess, in DC and then also just the news.
Yeah, I mean, your dialogue is so natural and so seamless. The way Julie talks to Jess and the way Jess talks to Tom and the way Sandy talks to Doug, all these things, you really dig deeply emotionally into these very well-formed people. Do you become the characters when you write, or do they become you, or how does that work?
I don't know. Hopefully I didn't become Tom. I I don't know. I think that I mean, I guess in a way we are, since I'm kind of channeling them as I'm writing, but they do tend to take over the story. Like I said, if it's a great writing day, then they're just all here. And in this case, they all wanted to talk at the same time a lot of times. So I had to keep a list of who had just gotten a chance to speak and then make sure everybody got an equal turn. That was my biggest problem with this story, because they all wanted, they're like, wait, I have something to say. So that was kind of a weird, interesting time.
That's great, though. It's better that when nobody talks.
Right, when they're all like,
I keep track on a chart too of who gets what chapter, so I know whose turn it is to talk. But sometimes they do elbow their way into the story.
Right, I know.
You have to love that, though, right?
Yeah, I know. I do love that. I think it's so fun. It's one of the more wacky and interesting things about being a novelist, I think, because it's so hard to explain if you haven't experienced it.
How somehow in your subconscious, there's another person who is talking, and more than that, has goals and motivations, and really comes to, do you have this?
Yeah, it's still, I mean, and it's so hard to explain. I mean, like, you and I could talk about this for days, right? And because it sounds so natural, but then the people listening are like, what is that about? Yeah. Which is, I mean, you know, I can't explain it, but it's wonderful and strange, and then sometimes terrifying. Like I said, when I had to run downstairs.
I know. I wish I had seen that. I wish I had seen your husband's face when you went downstairs, and that you had scared yourself. Well, that bodes well for the book, certainly. So I see Mosenia has a question coming up in a minute, and Anissa is here. Your fans are all here. Gail and everyone is here. I hope you'll come back and look at the chat later when we're finished in a couple minutes, because it's so nice to see all your fans and all the adulation for this book. You know, the ending, Kaira, and we won't tell it, but we probably couldn't even tell it, is so explosive and so touching and so chilling. How, you know, Panther, I know you don't know the ending, but how did that evolve? And I don't type the end, but when you did, or when you were finished, how did you feel about it?
Well, I knew it was kind of one of my darkest climax scenes that I'd written. And that was probably about the time that I was scaring myself. And I felt like it ended the only way it could for the story, because, oh gosh, it's so hard to talk about, right, without giving anything away. But I felt good about the ending. I tend to not always have things wrapped up in a perfect bow, because I don't think that, I mean, I just resist that oftentimes, but I don't want you to leave my story feeling terrified either. So I want some kind of closure, but maybe not necessarily the closure that you think's coming your way.
Oh, certainly. That's certainly true. No question about it. Absolutely. I always think that I can always figure out someone's ending as I'm reading it. And you totally got me on Somebody's Home. I really, as I said, I stayed up way too late reading this. Let me ask you one final question, and then I know we have some from the audience. So when you're, oh, and I forgot again, there's a giveaway. Kaira is doing a giveaway of Somebody's Home. One of you lucky winners will win a copy of Someone's Home. Just ask a question or leave a comment. Find time to tell you that now, right? But you have plenty of time to go ahead and do that. You won't get this book because I'm keeping it, but we will send you another one. One of the things that I think is so marvelous, again, about this book is that the ending is just right. It's unexpected. And we know in this slice of time what happens to each of the people. And that's satisfying. That's when you close a book and say, good book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I ended up writing a prequel because it just popped into my head, and it's free on my website if anybody's interested. But these characters were still so vividly hanging around, so I decided to explore what they were up to 2 days before. So on the Wednesday before the book starts on a Friday. So that was fun too. So I kind of called it Over the Edge. So I feel like these people were in this slice of time in this weekend. Even in the Wednesday leading up to the Friday the book starts, everything's just so angst ridden and anxious. So yeah, hopefully it ended with a little more peace.
Well, what a brilliant idea that is, Kaira. That's amazing. What's it called and where can we find it?
Oh, it's called Over the Edge. And I think if you sign up for my e-newsletter on my website, we automatically send it to you.
And that is KairaRouda.com. I
Right.
see many more people putting up their comments now. This proves that we have listeners who aren't always commenting. The minute I said there was a giveaway, there are people who hopped on and said, oh, me. Very wise, you all, because you will want to read somebody's home. Do you have a couple minutes to take questions from the audience?
Absolutely.
Great. Let's hear some questions from you all. Who has a question for Kaira? Oh, Bozania says, welcome. What is the next home you're planning to visit? That's a great question. Any ongoing writing projects?
I actually have another book coming out in November called The Widow. It's my first book set in Washington, D.C., so that was fun for me to write. And so that's kind of a different home base for a bit. And I hadn't written a story set there, so I'm excited about that.
And when does it come out specifically?
On November 15th.
Great. Can't wait to read it. Just hinting right here, just hinting. Yes, I can't wait to read it. I lived in Washington for 5 years, working on the Hill for a while. So I can't wait to read. I can't wait to read your Washington book.
Well, as you know, it's rife with us, like intrigue and backstabbing and really beautiful venues. So it was really fun.
That's great. Great. Gail is saying, who is the first person to read your first draft besides you?
Yeah, usually I have a couple beta readers, and then my daughter is a screenwriter, and so she will help me with any, like Jess or any teen person or anybody in their 20s, so I don't say the wrong words and make it sound goofy. So she'd be like, no, Mom, the daughter would not say it like that. I'm like, okay. So she'll help me with that, with the dialogue part too.
You are so lucky. I had a character in a book once, a person who was supposed to be 30, saying something like, okay, that's dandy. And my editor says, I don't think she would say dandy.
I just had one of those too, and I can't remember what it was. But same idea. They're like, we don't really say that anymore. I'm like, okay.
That's so sad. That's so sad. I know. And I also keep talking about people leaving a message on the answering machine, and they're like, voicemail.
Yeah.
Anyway, stuff you all didn't need to hear about. Who else has a question for Kaira? Kaira, Sylvia says, welcome, Sylvia. Do you utilize any kind of vision board during writing?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll have and I don't know why it's different every book, but sometimes I will rip photos out of magazines and that gets it going for me. Other times they just are so clear in my head that I just start writing.
Do you tear out people or places?
I tear out people. And then for places, I'll usually go online to an online real estate site if I need a house. And then I'll find something, really fabulous if I'm writing about a really rich person, and I'll find a $40 million listing and go, oh, that could be good, that kind of thing.
And I have to tell you that Julie's house in somebody's home, Julie's home, is quite the extravaganza. So it is worth reading it to find out how Julie lives and how she sort of matches her house. I thought that was really brilliant, Kaira. We have time for one more question. Janine is saying, can't wait to read somebody's home. Sherry is saying, do you have a favorite place to write?
I do. I'm sitting in it right now. I have an office and it's upstairs in our house. And I actually have a little view of the ocean, which is really fun. And what's kind of my dream was to, seriously, since third grade, was to be a writer, an author, and then to live on the beach someday. So I'm near the beach and I know. So and my dog's usually sitting right next to me. And so I feel really lucky.
Oh, I need to ask you that though. So you always wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, in third grade, our teacher had us write to the person that we wanted to become, which I thought was so cool. So I was living in Lincoln, Massachusetts, and I wrote to Robert McCloskey of Make Way for Ducklings because that was my favorite book. And he wrote me back and he said, thank you for writing, Kaira, but I'm an illustrator, not an author, so you should choose better next time. Which is so indicative of this. Smooth writing career. It's like that. Right. But anyway.
You know what? He left you. That's a wonderful story to tell.
Absolutely.
I will never look at the ducklings in the public garden the
Oh,
same way again after
I
hearing
know.
that story. That's
I
fantastic.
know.
You all, let's close by saying Somebody's Home by Kaira Rouda. We will give away a copy of this as soon as the Blazers in the back room figure out who, and look at that. The winner is Gail Rosenfeld. That's so great. You're the first person on the chat today, Gail. So that is marvelous. And we will be sending you Somebody's Home by Kaira Rouda. As I said, read it with the lights on. Word for it. Before I say goodbye to Kaira, let me say to you, do not move, do not move, do not move. At 4 o'clock, we will have the regular edition of Crime Time. This has been a special edition at 3 o'clock with the fabulous Kaira Rouda. At 4 o'clock, we'll be back with a regular edition of Crime Time, but is also a special edition because look what we have. Eva Yurchek's The Department of Rare Books and Special Collections. This is a rare and special book. So do not miss talking to Eva at 4 o'clock ET today. Go grab your coffee or grab your tea or grab your lemonade or whatever it is you're having and come back here and talk to us and hear all about Eva Yurchek's The Department of Rare Books and Special Collections, which you will adore. Kaira, thank you for sharing Somebody's Home with us. Congratulations on this.
Thank you, Hank, and thanks for all the great questions. I appreciate it.
Well, you're wonderful. And say hello to everyone. And I cannot wait to read The Widow. You all go out and snap up Somebody's Home as soon as you can, and we will see you back here at 4. Have a terrific rest of your day, and we will see you at 4 o'clock. Love you so much.